We asked you to tell us what's left you feeling ripped off, and you contacted us in your thousands.
You've told us about the companies you think get it wrong and the customer service that's simply not up to scratch.
I've complained and complained and nobody takes any notice of me.
In all honesty, I think it's just a way for the shops to make more money.
You've asked us to track down the scammers who stole your money and investigate the extra charges you say are unfair.
You don't want to spend any more, but yet they're always trying to offer you little things extra.
And when you've lost out but nobody else is to blame, you've come to us to stop others falling into the same trap.
Rang up the company and they went, oh, it isn't our fault. So whose fault is it?
So whether it's a blatant rip-off or a genuine mistake,
we're here to find out why you're out of pocket and what you can do about it.
Your stories, your money. This is Rip Off Britain. Hello and welcome once again to Rip Off Britain, where today we're doing our best to beat the scammers, trying to trick you out of your cash by arming you with all you need to know as to how to spot them coming. Now, the team in our office has been working really hard to try and keep abreast of the fraudsters' latest tactics, which I have to tell you are growing more audacious and shocking than ever.
yes, you know, every series, the scams we look at seem to get more sophisticated. So to try to understand exactly what's gone on and at what point alarm bells should have rung isn't always easy. And that's especially true of the stories we'll be looking at today.
And I tell you what, you'll think twice about your own security after hearing how, in one case, scammers were able to get into not one, but 5 of the same person's bank accounts, which of course is a reminder that it's not just down to all of us to keep our money safe, but the banks have a responsibility too. So we're going to be looking into what they're doing to make sure that our money stays safe.
Coming up, how crooks used a new scam linked to her phone to find their way into this woman's bank accounts, and she had no idea they'd done it.
Someone going into your bank account. I can't think of anything more personal. And I can't get past that feeling that somebody has seen how I conduct my life.
And hand over your cash or you'll never see your precious files again. What to do if scammers hold your computer to ransom.
I decided that I wasn't going to give in to these cyber terrorists, these people bullying. They're not going to get my money.
Every year on Rip Off Britain, we tell you about the latest tricks and tactics that are being used by scammers who are dead set on getting their hands on your money. And every year we tell you what to look out for to avoid being stung. But of course, as the nation gets wise to their tricks, the scammers also, unfortunately, seem to be one step ahead, developing new and ever more audacious ways of conning us out of our cash. No sooner is one scam exposed than another pops up to take its place. And we've been keeping you up to date with the fraudsters' latest tactics for years. Several times we warned you about how they've been able to keep your phone line open when you thought they'd hung up.
I feel that people have got to know about this business of being able to hold the phone line open, which is where I feel I slipped up.
Next, we revealed that criminals had started hijacking genuine phone numbers to make an unexpected call look reassuringly familiar.
The number that showed up on my phone was the same number as the back of the Santander card, and that convinced me he must be from the bank.
And in our last series, we showed you how you could even be tricked into thinking you were working for the police in an elaborate con that, once again, is all about getting your bank details.
To use that term so many times, now don't forget you're working undercover.
But as the scams keep evolving, it's estimated that as much as £755 million is stolen from British bank accounts every year. And now there's a new twist. Because retired civil servant Mary Edgley was targeted by a scam you will not see coming, and she's not someone you'd expect to be caught out. She's always tried to keep her bank account secure, and she's convinced that her vigilance has proved essential to protecting her money.
I would say I'm deeply suspicious of calls and rogue emails. I'm very, very careful about personal security. And part of that is because I've been on the internet for about 20-odd years now. I've been on internet banking and I've found it a great blessing, but not now.
The first inkling that Mary had that scammers had her in their sights was when, out of the blue, she was called by her credit card provider, Tesco Bank. Following the advice that we've often repeated, she refused to believe the call was genuine until she had called back to check.
In terms of calls, I will not answer anybody who rings me and wants to take me through security. They phone me. How do I know who they are?
But when Mary called back, the bank had some bad news. Someone had tried but failed to transfer £5,000 from her credit card.
Fortunately, the security was tight and they had, for whatever reason, been suspicious. I suppose, if I'm being honest, the fact that this hadn't gone through was actually quite reassuring.
But the fraudsters hadn't stopped there. When Mary logged on to check another of her accounts at Santander, she saw to her horror that they'd found their way into there too, and this time more successfully. Twice, someone had managed to transfer sums of around £5,000.
This was the shock. They'd been into my Santander account and tried both of my credit cards.
Over the next 24 hours, all Mary's bank accounts were bombarded with requests for balance transfers that she did not make. In total, the fraudsters tried to remove over £22,000 from her various accounts. But, thanks in part to her swift action containing what was happening, they didn't get their hands on any more than that initial 10.
I phoned everyone I had a credit card with, everyone I had a bank account with, and told them to freeze accounts. I stopped everything dead at that point.
To make matters worse, when trying to call her banks, Mary had realised that her mobile phone wasn't working. And I'm afraid that was no coincidence. Because when she contacted Vodafone to find out what the problem was, it gradually became clear that the fraudsters had managed to access her mobile phone account as well. And in fact, that had proved the key to the entire scam.
During the course of that chat, the person responding made reference to, had I not got the SIM? I don't know what you're talking about. What SIM?
Vodafone told Mary that her phone wasn't working because, as she had apparently requested, they deactivated her SIM card and sent out a new one. But Mary never had requested a new SIM. She immediately realised it must have been the scammers. And to do it, they would have had to bypass the security on her Vodafone account. Something Mary now realised was actually not that hard.
Several people would know my mother's maiden name. I'm sure several people would know my date of birth.
With the answers to simple questions like that, it would have been relatively easy to reset Mary's account and transfer her number to a new SIM card.
They could activate a blank SIM in my name. What that did, and here's the real puzzle, is that give them the ability to go into bank accounts.
The reason taking over Mary's phone number was so essential to the scammers' plan is that these days, most bank accounts come with an additional layer of security, requiring the account holder to use a unique passcode for each online transaction. And that passcode is usually sent out via text message. So getting hold of her phone number and those vital text messages was enough to help the fraudsters gain access to what they really wanted, Mary's money.
Someone going into your bank account. I can't think of anything more personal. And I can't get past that feeling that somebody has seen how I conduct my life. They've seen who I do business with. They've seen who I pay bills to. And of course, in doing so, they've seen whatever other accounts that they could access.
Mary was lucky. Because there was clear evidence of fraud, her bank gave her the stolen money back. But fundamental to the success of this scam was that the criminals had been able to get hold of just enough of her details to find their way through various identification checks. And as Mary's prided herself on always being so careful with her personal information, she's keen to know exactly how they did that.
I've racked my brains to think of what I could have done. My security is as tight as anybody I know. In fact, most of my friends would say I am the person least likely to have this happen to because I've always been almost obsessive about security.
Well, there is a variety of ways that criminals can get hold of your personal data. But one route that we've reported on before is through the dark web, the murky underworld of the internet, where criminals and scammers openly trade individuals' details and sell them on to the highest bidder.
One gang may find your email and password, and then they'll sell it to another organisation who will then use it to start doing things like phishing emails where they try to get data off you, or they'll use researchers to find things like your date of birth, where you live, that kind of information, and they build that up over a period of time, and that process can take up to 2 years.
We'll never know for sure how Mary's information was stolen, but it's likely that at least some of her data was traded on the dark web. So, to understand more about how even the most security-conscious among us can fall foul to the criminal market in personal data, we've brought Mary to meet digital forensic expert Keith Cottenden. And a point that she's keen to establish from the off is that whatever else may have happened, at no stage would she have fallen foul of any suspect spam emails.
It's part of my frustration throughout this whole period is people saying, did you click on an email? I am pretty certain I didn't. I don't think any of us can say, definitely we didn't. I'm pretty certain I didn't do those things. And that's what's puzzled me about this. It's kind of, why me?
Well, firstly, people are picked not because of who they are, just because they're, a number, data. And your data is as valuable as anybody else's data. It could be down to an inadvertent action that you don't even realise you've committed. There are international gangs out there who mine data from systems over a period of time, sometimes many years, and sell this data on to smaller organisations or smaller fraudsters.
And as soon as those fraudsters decide to act, as Mary discovered, they work fast. And a lot can happen.
This particular fraud is possibly a one-off opportunity, and they might only have a window of 12 hours to do serious damage.
But Keith is keen to reassure Mary that it's not just her responsibility to keep her data safe.
And I think the questions you need to be asking then are perhaps of your financial institutions and your service provider to ensure this doesn't happen. How are you protecting my data? How has this been allowed to happen?
So it might not have been me, it could have been a breach elsewhere.
It could have been a breach. Any system can be compromised. You might have been signed up at some point to an organisation that has had a data breach that you didn't even realise has happened.
And a data breach doesn't need to be at your bank or phone company. Anywhere you've logged in personal details, even something as simple as an online shopping account, could be the start of a trail that ends with fraudsters getting hold of your personal information.
The meeting with Keith was deeply shocking, in as much as people are trading in my information. Somebody perhaps old, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name, and they're just gathering those bits. But people are selling information.
Mary will probably never know for sure where her scam began, only where it ended. And when we spoke to Vodafone, where the fraudsters had somehow known enough about her to pass the company's identification checks, it confirmed that Mary had been a victim of what it called impersonation fraud. Vodafone told us it has 3 levels of verification on customer accounts. But it realises how distressing this has been for Mary, so it's now introduced special security measures on her account. It's also refunded the cost of the fraudulent calls and credited her account as a goodwill gesture. And whenever we speak to the banks about cases such as this one, they're always keen to stress how hard they work to stop this sort of fraud before it happens. Of course, in Mary's case, most of the fraudulent transactions did ring alarm bells and were prevented. But later in the programme, we'll take a closer look at what banks do to keep our money safe, as one of them gives us exclusive access to its fraud protection team. And we'll have crucial advice to make sure that your details don't end up in the wrong hands.
Coming up next, a terrifying new scam that doesn't actually involve criminals getting access to your bank account or trying to take control of your cash, but instead targets your computer, swooping in to prevent access to your most precious files and then holding them to ransom, demanding cash so that you can get them back. Now, it might all sound like something out of the Wild West, but computer ransomware is very much a 21st century crime, and the online outlaws behind it don't actually seem to care who they go after next. Gillian Pucci from Manchester is in a race against time.
I just knew something was wrong.
In 4 days, she'll be permanently locked out of the files on her own computer, thanks to cyber criminals who found a way to control access to what she's stored there and are demanding a ransom to set it free.
I know they are there, and that's what's heartbreaking.
It's a scam that could target you as well, but even if she pays up, Gillian can't be sure she will ever see her precious files again.
With any kidnapping, there's no guarantee that if you do pay the ransom, that you'd ever get them back.
Gillian uses her computer for everything from storing photographs to running the accounts for the family's Italian restaurant. She prides herself on being security conscious, and until recently, Gillian was very confident she could spot a dodgy email when she saw one. But in June this year, Gillian was caught out by one email that didn't look quite right.
It was an email addressed to me personally, and the heading said, "We would appreciate prompt payment of the attached invoice." Something inside me said, don't open it. But then I was thinking, well, have I ordered something, or has somebody cloned my card, has something happened, and I'm being asked to pay for something that I haven't ordered? So I did, I opened it.
The attachment that Gillian clicked on was blank, so she closed it again and thought nothing of it. But that one click would have disastrous consequences.
When I opened the computer the next morning, there was just writing information telling me that my computer had been infected with this cyber ransomware and that I would be unable to open any files or any documents.
Gillian's computer and all the data on it was being held hostage. That innocuous-looking email she clicked on had contained a software virus known as ransomware, which had encrypted every single file, document and photograph on her computer, converting them to a code that she simply couldn't unlock.
My heart sank. There's years and years of photographs of my children, of my family, of my dogs. It's devastating. It feels like you've been attacked. I know they're only photographs, but photographs contain memories, and they mean such a lot.
The cyber criminals demanded that Gillian pay up a ransom of about £600 within 2 weeks, or she would lose everything. She'd need to pay using an internet currency called bitcoins, and every week she delayed, the price would go up.
It's just a nightmare. You lose something that you really love, something that's really dear to you. I say lose, it's not lost, it's there. I just can't have it, can't open it, and it's devastating.
But even with so much at stake, Gillian is refusing to pay.
But I decided that I wasn't going to give in to these cyber terrorists, these people bullying. They're not going to get my money.
Instead, she's determined to somehow find a way to unlock the files before the ransom deadline.
I sat at my PC day after day, from the morning through to the night time, reading up, looking, uninstalling, installing. For the past 10 days, it's just taken over my life.
But with the clock still ticking, Gillian is no closer to finding a solution, so she's come to us for help. We've arranged for her to take her computer to tech detective John Salt. He's been in the business for over 20 years, and although this type of scam is something he's become very familiar with, he knows that even if Gillian does pay the ransom, it doesn't mean that she'll get her files back, and it could open the door to even more scams.
Well, the first thing, you've done the right thing not to pay, because chances are they won't repay your computer. And the second thing is they tend to send a list out of people who do pay to other scammers who will then send you scams.
Right.
So you've done the right thing by bringing it in. I think the first thing we need to do is find out what type of ransomware it is that's on, because there's quite a variety.
That's great. Thank
Yeah?
you. Yes.
Well, I think because time's of essence, we'll put it straight onto the bench.
John is going to try and find a way to break the encryption that's locked Gillian's files away.
Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to scan the system to see where the encryption came from, how deeply it's encrypted.
And he soon discovers the cyber criminals have modified almost every file on the computer.
They're little blank pages.
Yes.
Now, that's because your computer doesn't know how to open them. It
Right.
doesn't know what program they're going to use.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you look further up the list, it knows it's a photograph,
Yeah.
but when you go into it,
Yeah.
it then
Windows can't open this file.
can't open this file because it doesn't quite know how to open it.
Gillian is relieved that her computer is now in expert hands. The question is, can John save her files before the ransom runs out in 4 days' time?
I always thought that I was too clever and too savvy and I wouldn't open something like that. But that invoice, that email got me. I opened it and I unleashed the beast.
You know it's an easy mistake to make, but if attempts to unlock your files fail, the results can be disastrous, as Charles and Sally Jones discovered in 2015, when the main computer at the nursing home they run in Lancashire was also infected with ransomware.
Everything had gone. It wasn't just, say, some photos or a few files. Everything that we had stored on that computer was encrypted. I felt sick.
When we realised there was something going wrong, then you start to worry about what have they taken?
Yeah.
Have they got all the information? Have they got all the bank details? What have we lost?
Yeah, yeah.
Goodness me, that is scary. And then you suddenly realise you put all your eggs in one pot.
A message came up telling Charles and Sally that they needed to pay a $500 ransom to get their files back. Like Gillian, they didn't pay up, fearing probably very wisely that if they did, the scammers wouldn't keep their end of the bargain. But when the ransom expired, all their business accounts, invoices and contracts were lost, and they no longer had access to the backups either. They did enlist expert help, but by then it was just too late to recover the data, and it took them 6 months to get their business back on its feet.
It meant having to trawl through the files, the paperwork, change all the passwords, just build the whole thing up all over again.
The couple is determined never to fall into the same trap again.
But we've learnt our lesson, and we do take note of what's put out to us in the media now. Keep backing up, change your passwords, be very cautious on the email, what the heck you open up.
Back to Gillian, and she has just days to avoid the same fate, and it all depends on whether John can find a way to unlock her files. James Lyne is Global Head of Security for internet security firm Sophos. The company's been dealing with corporate ransomware for a couple of years, but has noticed that attacks on personal computers have become much more common in the last couple of months.
Really, it's a question of when you'll run into ransomware, not if.
While most attacks come as viruses attached to emails, which is what happened to Gillian and Charles and Sally, James is seeing more and more ransomware hiding in the background of websites that we might not even begin to question.
So the other extremely common way that cybercriminals will infect people is by putting malicious code into legitimate websites so that when you visit it, it deploys it silently in the background. As soon as I browse to this web page here, in the background, the attacker starts loading the nasty code, and a short while later, the browser will now crash. Of course, you'd think nothing of it. You just close it down, open it again, or go and make a cup of tea. But in the background, we're now starting to see files encrypted. And just a few seconds after it's encrypted enough data that it knows it can snare me into paying, it pops up these messages on the screen. And at the top, it just says, what happened to my files? What do I do? And there's links to a series of payment pages where you can hand over money to get the information back. So very quick and easy, just by browsing to a normal web page, I'm now in the position where all of my information is inaccessible to me throughout the computer.
Web browsers are regularly updated to make sure they can stand up to dangerous viruses. so make sure you don't ignore those update messages, or you might be leaving the door wide open to attacks. Unfortunately, though, there's no software update that can protect you against clicking on an infected email attachment.
If you get an email from someone you don't know, claiming something to do with an invoice or a payment that you weren't expecting, treat it a little bit like you would in the real world. Be a little bit skeptical about who that person is, and maybe don't open the attachment if you're not sure.
But however cautious you are, James says the best advice is to prepare for the worst.
Assume you're going to get infected. Have a backup plan so that you can restore your data back to where you were and not have to pay the cybercriminals money.
If you back up all your files to a drive that's not permanently connected to your computer, so it can't be infected with the same ransomware, it should be possible to restore your data to the way it was before the attack. Back in Oldham, Gillian hadn't done that. And now, 13 days since her computer was infected, she has just 24 hours before the deadline given to her by the ransomware cybercriminals.
Today's the day we find out if John's managed to retrieve anything off my computer for me. I'm not holding out too much hope.
So it's crunch time for Gillian and her precious computer.
Hello, Gillian. Nice to see you again.
Hi, John.
Well, the important thing is being able to retrieve a lot of the data that was important to you.
I'm so happy, so grateful.
Great.
Thank you so much.
No, it's a pleasure. That's what we do.
Good old John. He was able to beat the ransomware before the deadline expired by unlocking the files with specialist software. And while some files were lost for good, he was able to save the majority of Gillian's most precious documents and her memories.
I'm absolutely thrilled and so grateful to John for all his hard work that I've got the photographs back. It means such a lot to me. I never thought we'd be able to do it. I thought they were lost forever.
And she'll be doubly careful in how she protects her photographs in the future.
I'm going to learn from this mistake. Obviously, the first thing I'm going to do is keep a backup of them. And secondly, I'm not going to open any more suspicious emails and basically just learn a lesson from it.
Still to come on Rip Off Britain, behind the scenes of one of Britain's biggest banks to see how its fraud team keeps your details safe.
We can always compare the transactions that are presented to us with other customer spending that's happened previously, which will assist us in determining whether this perhaps is fraudulent or not.
Welcome to the Rip Off Britain pop-up shop. This year we were at Manchester's bustling Trafford Centre, meeting as many of you as we possibly could, including some of our younger viewers.
I love that bag. That is beautiful.
I'm really loving this open plan pop-up shop. It's actually the first time we've ever done it this way. And the great thing about it is that everyone can see what we're doing. We're getting lots and lots of people coming up to see what we're all about, and that means more problems solved. One family hoping to get their problem solved were the Bamforths, Ian, Phony and 4-year-old daughter Lizzie. And it was a hitch with Lizzie's birthday party that brought them to see Trading Standards Officer Sylvia Rook.
Well, thank you both for coming in to see me this afternoon. How can I help you?
Ian and Phony had booked and paid for an entertainer well in advance of the big day. But with hours to go, she rang to cancel.
You just cancel it because she's ill. So I said, that's fine then, but can you please find a replacement for me? And then they keep saying, I try, but until 7 o'clock that night, I still not get. But the party is the next day, which just make me all stressed out.
Yeah, it was very stressful.
Phony was able to find a replacement in the nick of time, but having forked out for 2 entertainers, she was understandably keen to get back the £100 she'd paid to the one who didn't show. Trouble is, almost a year on, she's still not had it.
So this person emailed me saying, she going to replace the money. I said, all right then, but never arrived. I email her back, never get reply. I call her, never get pick up. I left a voicemail, never get answer.
Ian and Phony had almost given up hope of recovering their money until they saw that our pop-up shop was in town. And Sylvia's sure the cash is recoverable if the couple follow some simple steps.
Well, obviously she's in breach of contract, and therefore you are entitled to your money back from her. You've done everything right in terms of emails, but we would always recommend you put something in a letter. Send a letter, record a delivery, keep a copy of it, and now what you need to say, if you do not credit my bank account within 14 days, then you'll be pursuing the matter through the small claims court.
Is there any time limit for pursuing this kind of...
No, in terms of your consumer rights, any consumer rights, if you want to make any civil action, you've got up to 6 years to make a claim.
All right.
So there's no problem with the fact it's over a year. But I would say, if you're going to do something, do it as soon as possible. Do you think that will help?
That will help, thank you.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with getting your money back, and I hope you have a lovely birthday.
Armed with Sylvia's advice, the couple are now much more optimistic about getting their money back, and they know exactly how they'll be spending it.
If we get the money back, then all that money is going to go to Lizzie. Maybe it'll go to a bigger and better birthday party next year when you're 5.
Elsewhere in the shopping centre, our lawyer Gary found an opportunity to catch up on some advice that he gave Gloria on the programme last year, and that he recommends everyone should think about putting in place.
So Gloria, last year you talked about making a lasting power of attorney, which is a way of appointing someone to make decisions for you if you can't make them for yourself. Have you done anything about that?
No, I tell you the truth. There's something in my makeup that doesn't want to let go. But I promise you, I will seriously think about it. I will.
Gloria's not the only person still mulling it over. Research shows that only 13% of over 50s have set up a lasting power of attorney. Yet the official advice is that it's sensible for every adult to get one sorted in case the worst happens and you're unable to make financial decisions for yourself.
Hopefully there will be an opportunity for you to put in hand arrangements. What would be awful is if there was a sudden accident or illness and it was too late, because then it can be very expensive and very worrying for your nearest and dearest.
You made me think about that aspect again.
Gary wanted to see if this is something passing shoppers have considered.
It is lovely to meet you.
Eva is 72 and considers herself very sensible when it comes to putting her finances in order.
My life insurance is paid for, my funeral's paid for. I don't believe in leaving my children or my grandchildren to do anything.
Eva has also made a will, but so far she hasn't done what Gary believes is so vital.
Now, the thing is, we're talking about power of attorney. Are you familiar with the phrase?
Yes, I am.
And have you done that?
No.
Would you do it?
I would do it if I got to the state where I couldn't do anything properly.
Actually, that's the wrong time to do it.
I know.
Yes, it's too late to sort this out when, for whatever reason, you may have already lost the capacity to make the best decisions, which is why Gary is so keen that we think about it in advance. But it's estimated that 2/3 of us haven't spoken to family members about how we'd like our finances managed if we're unable to do it ourselves.
Well, now, the thing is that you and I could make a pact, you see, because I've been told off now today for not taking out my power of attorney, and I think that is a point worth thinking about.
I think I'll discuss it with my eldest granddaughter and my son, and take power of attorney out.
Gary seems to have convinced Eva, and while with luck it's something she'll never need, if a power of attorney did become necessary, having one already in place could save her family a great deal of trouble and expense.
I think it would just be the final piece of the jigsaw, because if you actually were lacking capacity, the bank, the building society, the post office, they wouldn't know how lovely your family are, and they wouldn't know that they are the right people to be dealing with things for you.
Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nice
see you
to
again.
meet you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
How fabulous is she?
Wonderful.
I think one of my favourite parts of our pop-up shop event is this, Bright Corner, because it means you can just come along, let off steam and tell us exactly what you think about anything at all.
And that's exactly what this lady did after falling for an offer that had a costly sting in the tail.
I got the promise of a voucher for £10 of petrol. They wanted £2.78 from me in order to send me the voucher, so I foolishly gave them my credit card number. When my credit card statement arrived, they'd also taken £78 and 90-odd pence to join their club. I still haven't received my £10 voucher. The whole thing has made me so furious with myself more than anything. Do never, ever, ever, never, never give your credit card number to anybody, and I'm really, really furious. And that's the end of my rant. Thank you.
Earlier in the programme, we saw how the tactics being used by fraudsters who are trying to steal your savings get more and more elaborate all the time. And however much you may be on your guard, they do keep finding all too plausible ways to convince you to give them access to your cash. One question that we're often asked is whether or not the banks are actually doing enough to keep our money safe in these situations. So we've had an exclusive look behind the scenes at one of Britain's biggest and best-known banks to find out exactly what is being done to stay one step ahead of the scammers. The bad news is that bank fraud has rocketed in recent years, with more than 3 million cases reported in 2015, when scammers walked away with over £750 million of our money. And the good news? Well, it could be a whole lot worse. Because over that same period, the banks managed to prevent almost £1.8 billion being stolen by stopping the scammers in their tracks. But however reassuring that may be, it's small consolation for anyone whose account does get plundered by the crooks. And those who have been scammed frequently tell us they simply are not happy with the way that their bank dealt with what happened. In autumn 2015, consumer group Which explored that in more detail, surveying victims of fraud to see what they made of the way that the banks had handled the situation. And in that report, there was one big name that came in for particular criticism. Barclays had the lowest score for its overall response to fraud cases. And as a result, it took a lot of flack in the press.
So I'm just heading off to their corporate headquarters here in Canary Wharf in London to see not only what they're doing to try and keep up with the fraudsters, but also how to improve the way in which they handle fraud claims.
Barclays has invested millions in systems to tackle and stay one step ahead of the ever-evolving threat of fraud. And a key part of that is training frontline staff like Daisy here to identify fraudulent transactions as they happen, so the bank can stop the crime in its tracks and protect customers' money.
What alerts you to the fact that there's a problem on someone's account?
So the system itself will alert me as to that we need to check some transactions with a customer. So when we receive that call, it'll bring the details of the transactions in questions on screen.
Can we see that?
Yes, of course.
We should say this isn't a real person. This is as it were, a training exercise.
Yes, indeed, yeah, dummy system, so to speak.
So we're not actually looking at somebody's bank account here.
We can always compare the transactions that are presented to us with other customer spending that's happened previously, which will assist us in determining whether this is typical of that customer, whether it's in their spending profile, and ultimately whether this perhaps is fraudulent or not.
The software that Daisy is using contains unique profiles of every Barclays customer and tracks their spending habits so that it can flag anything out of the ordinary, which staff can then ring the customer to check.
Essentially, so we'll detect a transaction that we need confirmation for from the customer, so we can run through, some of their spending and check prospective fraudulent spending as well, so we can identify whether that is the case.
The software is designed to identify fraud when there's still time to stop it happening. But much of the recent criticism levelled at Barclays has been about how it responds to customers who've already lost money to criminals. Between 2010 and 2015, the Financial Ombudsman Service received almost 15,000 complaints about banks refusing to refund money that customers had lost to fraudsters. 4,000 of those complaints were from Barclays customers, and that's more than for any other bank. Alex Grant is Barclays' head of fraud prevention.
Why is it that there are 4,000 of your customers over the last 5 years who have not had their money refunded?
There are a small number of cases where we would say, actually, it is not the bank's responsibility. We will profile those transactions. We will do our best to protect those customers. We will spend many more millions of pounds on customer education than any other bank to allow the customer to protect themselves.
But you will know that the fraudsters, the scammers, get more and more convincing with their lies. They do all sorts of tricks that ensure that the person who is your customer on the receiving end of their telephone call believes 100% that they are talking to someone from Barclays. And yet you are saying that if they do that and they give away that information, they then are at fault and you're not prepared to reimburse them their money. Is that what you're saying?
In a very, very small number of cases...
4,000 in 5 years?
I will repeat, small number of cases we will not always refund, but the vast, vast majority, and it is in the very, very high 99%, we will refund.
Alex, across the banking system as a whole in this country, in the last year alone, there were 3.2 million fraudulent cases online. What's happening? Are the fraudsters upping their game? Are you keeping in touch with that?
Absolutely, the fraudsters are upping their game. The level of attack across the industry has grown tremendously in the last year. At Barclays, we are absolutely upping our game. We have invested many millions of pounds in new technologies, new systems to fight against the fraudsters. So we are absolutely at the forefront of protecting our customers and fighting fraud.
Of course, Barclays isn't the only bank constantly reviewing its security to keep the fraudsters at bay. Over the coming months, we'll all see the levels of security on our bank accounts change dramatically. Whether that's through fingerprint verification on online accounts at NatWest, voice recognition protection with HSBC, or even selfie security that knows your face. That's already in place at the new digital-only banking service, Atom Bank. Of course, even with all that technology, if we as customers let our guard down even for a moment, the fraudsters will still find a way into our accounts. So it's up to each of us to deploy our own secret weapon and be cynical about every communication we get asking us to do anything with our account. And if that means questioning even genuine contact from your bank, well, better safe than sorry. Daisy, when you ring somebody, how does the person on the end of the phone know that you are the genuine article? Would you welcome it? People challenged you and said, who are you? Prove to me that you're Barclays.
There definitely have been occasions where customers have challenged me and said, you know, how do I know I'm speaking to? And we always, you know, to an aspect endorse that and say, you know, it's wonderful that you do have that vigilance.
So you'd like everybody to do it, really?
Yeah, ultimately.
Thank you.
If you've got a story you'd like us to investigate, then you can get in touch with us via our Facebook page, BBC Ripoff Britain, our website, that's bbc.co.uk/ripoffbritain, or email ripoffbritain@bbc.co.uk. And of course you can send a letter to our postal address, Ripoff Britain, BBC Key House, Media City UK, Salford, M50 2QH.
You know, for years we've been saying that frauds keep getting more ingenious and harder to see them coming. But with some of the new techniques being employed to stop them, it really does feel like the banks are being just as inventive when it comes to keeping us all safe.
But, of course, that's absolutely no consolation to anyone who find their money's already been mysteriously spirited away. So the message is stay vigilant and look out for even the slightest sign of anything suspicious. Remember, it only takes a second to be taken in.
And we certainly hope that you've been able to pick up some tips from our programme today to ensure that it's your money that stays very firmly under lock and key. And please do keep telling us about any new scams that you come across so that we can get the word out as soon as possible to as many people as possible. But I'm afraid that is where we have to leave it for today. So thanks very much indeed, as always, for joining us. And we hope to see you again very soon. But until then, from all of us here.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.